Good morning and welcome. We will get started here in about 5 to 6 minutes. Wait for some other people to join us. Glad you could be with us. All right, we have a few in here already. Good morning, Sam. Sam Nestor or Tinoco? Good morning, Gus. Oh, good morning, Sam Nestor. All right, we're getting a few people in here. Let's see. How are the analytics looking this morning? Looks like we're running well. Fantastic. Good morning, Talon. How are you? All right. Getting our viewers up. We'll get started here in just a few minutes. Hope everyone's had a good day so far. Hope you're alive, awake, alert, and enthusiastic. All right, guys, we'll get started here in about 1 minute. right, good morning. Okay, guys, so we're going to go ahead and get started. A couple of things, a couple housekeeping things real quick. Remember that the chat bar is not used for conversations between you guys. It's a way for you to communicate with me if you have any questions about the lecture as we go. Today's lecture is going to be a little bit long. We have a lot to cover, and we still won't even be done with Alexander when we finish it. We'll do all the rest of that next week. But let us get moving. Give me 1 second as we get the slides coming in. Here you guys go. Alexander's conquest. Alexander sets out to conquer. Alright, so today's standard is SS6W3 2 through 3.7. And standard 3 says, recognize significant events, figures, and contributions of classical civilizations like that of Phoenicia, Greece, Rome, and Axum. We are finishing Greece today. We've covered a little bit of Phoenicia. We're going to cover them more as we get closer to Rome, or once we get into Rome. And then, of course, we'll cover Rome and Axum at that point. But as we move forward from there, my expectations, number 1, we got to take notes. Number 2, we pay attention. Number 3, we learn something new. And 4, we connect ideas to earlier lessons. Because history builds on top of itself, we got to be able to connect those ideas and get them together so we understand what's going on. My essential question for you today is, how did Alexander the Great conquer Asia Minor? Announcements. Guys, I have what we're going to be doing on Thursdays from 6 to 7 is, I call it Your Choice Lectures. It's going to be a 30-minute lecture of your choice. Now, it could be covering something we've already covered. It could be covering something new. It could be covering some item you have interest in. Last week, I covered the beginning of the Second World War, talking about what instigated the beginning of the war and led all the way up to it. Discuss some super weapons the Nazis had developed, or Nazi military build up in general. So the Your Choice lecture is an opportunity for you to suggest to me a topic that you would like me to give a lecture on, do a little research on it, and then present it to you guys. So that's an opportunity. Say you're interested in Japanese history, or say you're interested in World War II, or maybe you're interested in more current events. All you got to do is put that, send me a suggestion in chat on what we should be doing. I'll pick one, and then we'll go with that, and it'll be live from 6 to 7. So you have an interest, if you have a topic you're interested in, all you gotta do is throw it out to me, and I'll do some research and produce it for you guys for 30 minutes from 6 to 7, well, for an hour, from 6 to 7, if you have any questions on that. On top of that, we have an upcoming project, or upcoming projects. I wanted to go over and just say, when we get to Rome, we're gonna be doing more battle maps, and you guys are actually going to make another battle map for me, and you're gonna send me the write-up on that. And then as well, is what I would like for you guys to think about, is what makes a great leader. We are going to have a presentation on what is a great leader, or who was a great leader from ancient history. I want you to think about the people we've covered, and especially people like Alexander the Great. We're going to cover Julius Caesar in depth. We're going to cover a lot of the emperors in depth. So it's something that you want to be really interested in. I want you to go ahead and start thinking about what kind of leader you would like to be interested in talking about. Use that information that you've gained from your leadership class to better identify leadership qualities or traits in an individual. All right, so all of that stuff is out of the way. We're diving in. Here we go. Where I left off with you guys last week is Alexander the Great was 18 years old. He had just won a major victory. His father had just taken control of Greece. But in October of 336 BC, Philip of Macedonia was assassinated. He was killed by a pious bodyguard who was able to escape following the assassination. At 19 years old, Alexander becomes the new king of Macedonia, and he barely has time to respond before Thebes, a city that he helped conquer, decides to rebel. It's hard to imagine being thrust into this situation, dealing with the loss of a loved one, and then having your authority challenged. Not challenged in just a small way, as this was tit for some words. No, this is severe challenge. This is saying, we don't have to follow you anymore. You're not strong enough to prevent us from leaving. So Alexander has one choice. I guess he has a couple choices. One, he can let Thebes go away and then probably lose the support of all of Greece. He can lose his ambition to take over Persia, or he can do something about it. We're going to find out what he does. But first, I'm going to give you some more background information. This is Philip of Macedonia's grave, or what's left of it. He's not actually buried in that box. He's been cremated and placed in the box that is was found. We believe that his cremation's box, and there's actually a special word the Macedonians used for it. I have forgotten that. But that's his beautiful crown of oak leaves that is suspended above it, and that is what we believe Philip of Macedonia was buried in. So in 338 BC, Philip II, and then we're going backwards here, just to give you a little background. In 338 BC, Philip II was named the leader of the League of Corinth, giving him control over most of the Greek city-states. So if you remember what I told you, Philip II had set off to conquer Greece. He wanted to control Greece so that he could eventually invade Persia. And so in 338, he had defeated the Greek armies. He was established as the leader of a league at the Corinth, so they called it the League of Corinth, and it gave him control over Greece with the express goal of taking over Persia, right? So the Greeks want revenge for the Persian invasion by Xerxes and Darius, and so they ask Philip to take over. Now, prior to the assassination, Philip had sent Alexander into exile. Alexander got a little bit intoxicated. Another word for that is got drunk at a party and had insulted one of Philip's generals, actually attacked the guy. And Philip was very upset, and he sent Alexander away. Alexander was upset at his father because he thought he was the sole heir. His father was still trying to get a pure-blood heir to the throne. He attacked him, ends up bringing a lot of the issues into the throne room. Alexander sent away and is not there when Philip is assassinated. Actually, he is there. Sorry, I take that back. He is there when he gets assassinated. The assassin may have actually been hired by Alexander's mother, Olympias. We talked about her beforehand. There's some history that may suggest that she was the one that had Philip assassinated. She may have paid off the guard that did it. Why? Well, she really didn't want Alexander to get replaced. Because she was Greek and Alexander was half Greek, the Macedonians were looking for a pure-blood heir from Philip II. And he actually got a new wife, and she was pregnant. And there was a possibility that that was a boy. And if that was a boy, then he would have better claim on the throne than Alexander did. This really angered Alexander. Part of the reason he attacked that general is because the general said something about Alexander's blood. It ends up getting into the point where Alexander is actually there to see Philip again as they're preparing for an invasion when he is assassinated. Now, as soon as Philip's death, Thebes rebelled. Thebes had helped plan the initial attack on Macedonia when the war began. And so Alexander now has to go put down this Theban revolt and bring all of Greece back into his control. What does cremated mean? Vero, that's a fantastic question. Cremation is the process of burning a dead body until it turns into ashes. It is a very common form of burial rite. It's still done today. There's places called crematoriums that specialize in that, and you can have the ashes of the person after they've been cremated. It's a way to keep them closer to you than putting them in the ground. You can actually have the urn, is what we call it. You are in an urn, and you can keep that with you. You can even have your pets cremated. When I was growing up, we had pets that were cremated, and so it's something that you can do with a body. All right, it's actually has very ancient traditions. All right, so back to this. The Greek campaign. So following the Theban revolt, Alexander quickly conquered Thebes. He really sets off and is set to defeat them. He defeats them in battle very quickly. Thebes surrenders the city, and he's very even-handed. He doesn't kill anybody that doesn't have to. He has great composure. He gained the support of the rest of Greece for how he handled the situation. Most people would go in there and look at the situation, especially if you think about the Assyrians, they'd go in there and they'd kill everybody. Alexander actually had the right to go in there and kill everybody, but he doesn't. He looks at the situation, says, you guys messed up, but I need your support if we're going to take over Persia. Because of these actions, he becomes the leader of the League of Corinth. He organizes his army, and he sets off on the Persian campaign. With an army of 32,000 infantry and 5,100 cavalry, Alexander crossed over to Asia Minor in 334 BC and sacked the city of Baalbek. All right, so Asia Minor. Let me kind of explain Asia Minor to you guys. Asia Minor means the Middle East of Asia. All right, it specifically is talking about areas west of the Hindu Kush Mountains and south of the Russian plateau, or the Turkish plateau. So it's really looking at areas like the Middle East, so what we call Iran, Iraq, Israel, that whole region, heading south towards Saudi Arabia. That is Asia Minor, all right? That is where the Persian Empire is. So Alexander crosses over the Straits of the Hellespont, is what we call it, the Hellespont, and he crosses over into Turkey, today Turkey, and he sets out for the town that controls the Hellespont, which is the town of Baalbek, and by doing that, he is officially declaring war on all of Asia, or all of the Persian Empire. Hey, again, Sam, the chat bar is not used for you guys to communicate. It's so that you can ask me questions. It's not for you guys to talk to each other. So, when Alexander begins his Persian conquest, the Persians initially send out a force of mercenaries to go fight them. Mostly Greek mercenaries from the Ayatollahs, a little bit of their men from Egypt. It's just a group of people that were sent out to fight. Alexander quickly defeats them. I mean, just absolutely wipes them out and sends a very clear message to the Persian Empire that he's not going to be satisfied with just taking back small pieces of land. He's there to really get all of Persia. And Darius, this is Darius III, is starting to get the impression that Alexander doesn't just want to get revenge for the invasion. He wants something more. We know from the other side that Alexander wants all of Persia. Specifically, though, he has said that this invasion is to get redemption for Greece. It's also to restore temples. One of the places he stops is at the Temple of Achilles, which was located in Turkey. And there he has his weapons blessed, and he leaves his crown on the altar there so that he is fully committed to being a hero and saving Greece. Now, he's not really saving Greece, he's invading another country. But he's making that statement that I am a hero, just like Achilles. I am chosen by the gods to take on Persia, and that is my goal. He is singularly focused. In 333 BC, Alexander's troops saw their first major combat at the Battle of Issus. So, on November of 333 BC, Darius it's actually the third, I messed that up, it's not Darius II, it's Darius III, the Emperor of Persia, led his army south to the town of Issus. The armies met along the banks of the Panaris River, and the Persian position would ensure their defeat. Their army was confined, the Gulf of Issus was on their right flank, and the mountains on their left. What had happened is Alexander had been staying in Issus as his temporary camp, and then he was moving south down towards at that time would be Syria. He actually passes the Persian army, doesn't know they're there. They actually pass each other. Remember, there's no satellite imagery. You don't know where other people are at in the ancient world. So missing an army isn't at all impossible. It actually happened quite frequently. So they actually marched around each other. Alexander realizes he's cut off. He's cut off from Greece. Right, he's just cut off from Macedonia, he's cut off from his homeland, his supplies, he's cut off from his temporary camp at Issus. So now he has to fight Darius. You can't let the enemy army get behind you. That's a terrible, terrible mistake. So he has to turn around, and now he's got to fight. And so they're going to fight on the banks of the Panaris River. Just taking a look of the numbers, Alexander had 1,300 Pilatus. Pilatus are very light infantry. They're mostly designed to throw spears, be very quick, shoot arrows. They're really not heavy infantry. He has 22,000 heavy infantry units. These are mostly phalanxes. He's got 5,850 cavalry members for a total of 40,850 troops. Darius III, on the other hand, has somewhere between 30,000 and 80,000 light infantry. He has 11,000 cavalry, 10,000 Persian immortals, 10,000 Greek mercenaries, from a total from anywhere between 50,000 and 60,000, or 250,000 to 600,000 troops. So there's two figures there at the bottom where it says total. The top figure, the 50,000 to 60,000, is a guess by ancient historians of what the total, as a guess by modern historians of what the Persian numbers were. The bottom number is what the Greek historians said the numbers were. Again, the Greeks love inflating the numbers to make it look like they won a huge battle. But it's how they're identifying what happened there. So the guy on the left with the small javelin and the spear, he is not wearing any chest armor, he's just wearing a tunic. That is a Pilatus. All right, his main job is to throw that spear and be very quick on his feet. They're not going to get into much heavy combat. They're designed to move around quickly on the battlefield. And then to the right, of course, is our phalanx. You can see the giant silicas as they're preparing for battle, and this phalanx will move up and attack the enemy. So, let's get a breakdown of the positions or dispositions of the Greeks and of the Macedonians and the Persians. So, if you see a square with a line through it, that is a cavalry unit. All right, Alexander is in the bottom right of our map. He is located here. I'm going to get my pencil out. This is Alexander right here. All right. One of the Persian units showed up to the battle late. They're here on the right flank. They showed up late to the battle. On the front, we have the Macedonian heavy infantry. We have a little bit more of them next to their right. So the heavy infantry is the dark blue. Lighter, those are Pelotas near Alexander's cavalry unit. All right, and then he's got cavalry on his left flank. Hey guys, remember, we're not playing around in the chat bar. You're there to ask me questions. Thank you. All right, and the Persians have set up in different groups, Orientals being their groups from Egypt and India. Then we have their Greek mercenaries forming the middle, and then more Orientals on the outside. Darius is located in the square that says D in the middle of his army. So this is how the battle is set up. Now let me explain a little thing about the terrain. To the left, we have the Gulf of Isis. I am putting a square around that. That is the water that is going to hem in the Persian Empire, all right? They have a much, much larger force. They're getting hemmed in there. They're getting stuck. On the right-hand side are the mountains, all right? This is mountains. So again, very hard terrain to move through. They're limited. They're pushed in. The Persians have a much larger army. If you're smart, you spread out so that they have to fight with smaller amounts of men. All right. If you're smart, you can come around the sides and attack here and here, but they can't do that. All right, because they are hemmed in. They can't move around without running into each other. Alexander did a fantastic job of positioning for this battle. You can't ask better leadership. What is cavalry? Cavalry are soldiers on horseback or mounted on chariots, all right? Cavalry units are, like if you imagine a knight in shining armor, that's an armor on a horse, that's cavalry. All right? Cavalry are men on horses. All right, here we go. This is Alexander's cavalry at the Battle of Issus. He is going to lead them. His cavalry is known as the Companions. They're the best of the best of the best. These are all nobles from Macedonia. His companions are his best friend, and Alexander is going to lead them into battle. So, as the battle breaks out, what Alexander does is he immediately charges forward with his cavalry into the Greeks, and he is going to wheel around. He is looking for Darius, all right? Darius had moved over. Alexander charged straight at him. Darius couldn't get it ends up running, okay? So Darius, he ends up running away from the battle. Alexander actually chases him for like 7 miles. He chases after this guy. His goal is to kill Darius on the spot. He wants to kill him and end it all right there. Darius gets scared, so they end up running away. All right? Darius takes off. Boom, he's gone. At the same time, Alexander's left flank over here, they actually get driven back quite a bit. The Persians do a great job of pushing them back, but it was to no avail. The battle was pretty much won as soon as Darius fled, which happened pretty quickly. Alexander really went after him. They charged directly at him. He wasn't ready for the fight, and he ends up retreating. Because he does that, his men end up running away. This is the aftermath. Alexander lost something like 452 men. 5,000 of his men were wounded, but he captured the Persian treasury and Darius' family. Darius, on the other hand, lost 20,000 to 40,000 men. He ends up fleeing, and he loses control of Syria, Egypt, and the most of the Middle East. All right, so 5,000 wounded really is probably a small number. It was probably much more than that. We don't really know, though. Darius losing the 20,000 to 40,000, not actually that big of a blow to him. Remember, if he shows up to the battle with the numbers that the Greek historians suggest, it's barely a fraction of them. Now, if he shows up with what modern historians said, that is an absolute rout, okay? If the modern numbers are correct, and he had 50,000 to 60,000 men, losing 20,000 to 40,000 is massive, okay, guys? That's like 1/4 to 2/3 of the army getting wiped out on the battlefield. Absolutely unbelievable strike here by Alexander. His men really, really do control it. But the very important thing here is that he captures the Persian treasury and Darius' family. The Persian treasury is how they paid for their troops. So all their money that they paid their troops was captured in the Persian camp. The Greeks were, or the Alexander and the Macedonians were able to capture that, as well as they captured Darius' family. Darius would try to get them back with a ransom. Alexander wouldn't do that. He wouldn't let him go for the ransom. It was actually a lot of money. He wouldn't do that. He said Darius has to come to him and surrender all of Persia. Darius refused, but Alexander was still a good guy. He didn't end up murdering the family. He left them alone, but they were his prisoners from then on out. All right, Janelle. So they are not in a ravine. They're actually in what we would call a floodplain. They're in between or a plain. They're on the bottom side of a mountain in between pretty much the sea and a river. It's really a floodplain right there. It's difficult terrain, but yeah, it's pretty rough stuff. It's pretty rough stuff. A ravine would tell us that there's mountains on both sides. Okay, so the aftermath, quite a incredible victory for Alexander the Great and the Macedonians. In 332 BC, just 1 year later, Alexander conquers the city of Aleppo and then the rest of Syria. From Syria, Alexander would move south, taking the city of Jerusalem, and in 331, Alexander arrived in Egypt. Alexander rode into Egypt like the pharaohs of the Old Kingdom. Crowds took to the streets to catch a glimpse of this magnificent king riding this legendary horse. And it really went to Alexander's head. At the Oracle of Siwa, which is a religious spot in Egypt, Alexander was proclaimed the son of the god Zeus Ammon. Zeus Ammon, remember Zeus is the Greeks' god, or the head of the Greeks. All right, the Greek pantheon, the head god, and Amon is the head god of the Egyptian pantheon. So this was quite a title he was receiving. He's not only a god he's not only the son of his own god in the Greek sense, he's also the son of the god in the Egyptian sense. So this is a great honor. And on that thought, he established one of the most beautiful cities of the ancient world, and that was the city of Alexandria. He actually go on to name another 14 cities after himself. The guy really liked using his name to name cities. So if you ever become a conqueror, remember, just name the city after yourself to confuse everybody. So he established Alexandria, and here I have a picture of the lighthouse at Alexandria. This is what it would have looked like. The lighthouse of Alexandria was actually built after Alexander's death, but it was designed to show the city's beauty. At the top of it would have been a statue of Zeus. It could have been Poseidon, we're not exactly sure. It would have been the second tallest building in the world at the time. The only thing taller than that would have been the Pyramid of Giza, but it was quite a magnificent structure. We found the remains of it in 1994. The remains of the tower were actually found, and the lighthouse were found. They were actually reused in a lot of projects after the tower fell due to an earthquake. Alexandria had become this massive city port. It would have its own Parthenon. It had its own amphitheater, and actually we can point some of those locations out. The building in the center of this picture. Oh, my pointer's gone. No. All right, there we go. The building here in the center of the picture is the lighthouse at Alexandria. The Parthenon of Alexandria was located here. The stadium and amphitheater was located here. All right, the library of Alexandria, we'll get to that in a second, is located on this as well. So, not only did he build a lot of, this was supposed to be a Greek-ish city, so a lot of the infrastructure is very much Greek in its design. The Parthenon, the Parthenon, the Parthenon, the amphitheater, also Greek in design, but also they built a library at Alexandria. When Alexander set off to conquer Persia, he didn't just do so with an army. He brought with him lots of scholars, lots of scientists, and historians, and writers, and poets. He brought these people with him so they could capture his conquest. They could understand what he had done. He was a student of history. He was a student of science. And so he really wanted this stuff recorded, not only just the animals, but everything. And a lot of these records were kept in a building in Alexandria called the Library of Alexandria. Alexandria would become a center for education. All right, it was one of the most advanced libraries of its time. Thousands and thousands of manuscripts piled high on rolls. It was quite a sight. It's such a shame that it was burned down during a crusade invasion of that area, but it just was a spectacular, spectacular building, if all legends are to be remembered. So Alexandria, very much an incredible city built by Alexander to recognize his conquest of Egypt. So he only stays in Egypt for a few months. Alexander really is on a mission, and his mission is to conquer, okay? In 331 BC, Alexander left Egypt. He headed toward the city of Babylon. On the field outside of the village of Guatemala, Alexander encountered a massive Persian army led by Darius. The Battle of Guatemala. This battle would be the last meeting of Alexander and Darius in battle. Darius had learned his lessons of the Battle of Issus and had carefully chosen Guatemala for his next battle against Alexander. This time his army was quite different, having brought together men from all over his empire, even Indian mercenaries. Darius selected the spot because it favored his massive numbers and allowed him to use his chariots more effectively. So, this is going to be the site of one of the greatest battles in the ancient world. By the numbers. Alexander has 47,000 men. Darius has somewhere between 50,000 and 100,000 according to modern estimates. but ancient Greek historians said it was somewhere between 250,000 and 1 million men. All right, very quickly, the magic word, I know you're all looking for it, the magic word today is Gaugamela. Gaugamela. Don't ask me how it's spelled, it's on the PowerPoint, so I don't want to hear that later on, some of you, and some of you know who you are. It is Gaugamela. I'll go ahead and write that down just in case. There will be a question on your quiz today. What is the magic word? There it is, make sure you remember it. Alright, so, Gaugamela. Let's talk a little bit about Darius's preparations. So before the battle, he had his men go out and they cleared the battlefield of any big rocks or twigs or sticks or whatever was in the way. He really wanted to make it very easy for his troops to move along the battlefield. On top of that, he added a little bit of traps. He wanted to keep Alexander from being able to move as effectively as he had, and he set up his forces in 2 straight lines with light infantry and cavalry in the front, and then his heavier infantry behind them. So this map is a great depiction. Alexander actually showed up a little bit late to the battle. He slept in the night before. So he shows up a little bit late to the battlefield. The Persians stayed up all night waiting for the attack. The Macedonians had a great night's sleep, so they were well rested. Alexander called a bunch of his men by their name, recounting incredible deeds that they had done. He'd say, you remember when Varel charged the enemy and took out 10 guys? Do you remember when Valeria threw that rock and took out their general? Do you remember when Janelle got on for my video in time? So they would go over these incredible achievements that these guys had done, and he said, I want you to do it again. Jordan, I want you to come back and do it again. I want you to be strong just like you were at the Battle of Issus. Or all those other times that you guys were spectacular. I want you to remember that. And he inspired his men. They got real pumped up. On top of that, as Alexander's giving this speech, he sees a sign. An eagle comes flying over his army. And it goes towards the Persians. The eagle is the sign of Zeus. Alexander sees this as an indication that not only will he win the battle, but it will be spectacular. The battle begins. So, what is going to happen is you already see the arrows pointing in directions. Those are the ways that the troops are going to move. So Alexander starts by moving right. He moves right very, very hard, and the Persians try to counter, and so they move right as well. Right as that gap opens up, Alexander charges. So let me show you that movement again with the pen so it makes it a little bit clearer for you guys. We're going to use blue. So, Alexander and his men are going to move this way. Alright, Darius is going to see this. And fearing that Alexander is trying to leave the battlefield or is trying to attack the flank, he's going to have all of his men do the same thing. This middle line is going to go this way. All these guys are going this way, this way, this way, this way. They're trying to keep up with Alexander. They want to cut him off on the sides. So you can see all of these troops moving this way. Alright. Then what Alexander does is he tells his men to get straight now. He once he gets to a point that he thinks is the right spot, he has his phalanx. This was that big phalanx line in the beginning. They stay put, and now they're going straight ahead. He turns his cavalry, and he attacks this gap. So what happened is the enemy had opened up a hole, this hole right here. They had opened that up when they fled, and Alexander is able to attack, and he's going to punch straight through, and he's going in one direction, straight at Darius. Darius's brother tries to get in there and block him. He ends up getting killed. Alexander grabs a spear within about 20 yards of Darius, grabs it and throws it and misses Darius by a matter of inches. All right? Some portrayals predicted that it scratched his cheek. All right? Alexander almost kills Darius right then and there. He's yelling his name. He's looking for him on the battlefield. He's trying to get him, but he's not able to. All right? Darius turns and he runs away, and the Greeks just clean up. The Persians are terrified they were off the battlefield. Darius had hoped that he had 200 chariots with spikes on their sides on their wheels. He was hoping they'd be able to run straight through Alexander's men. Alexander's men just made holes to where the chariots ran through the gaps, and they killed those guys. It was absolutely an astounding victory. The aftermath. Alexander had about 100 infantry and 1,000 cavalry killed. Darius, on the other hand, lost something between 40,000 and 90,000 men, 300,000 of which were captured. Darius would be later killed by one of his own men while retreating. Alexander gains control over Asia Minor. He is now the Emperor of Persia and Greece and just about everything else. After winning the Battle of Guatemala, Alexander took control of the city of Babylon. He remarked that it was the most incredible city that he had ever seen. He was really, really, really blown away by its beauty. He was blown away by its just absolute incredible technologies, its hanging gardens. He was blown away. He said it was the most beautiful city he'd ever seen. And he even says, look, Aristotle was wrong. Aristotle had probably never been there, and he had called the city we called it a barbaric city, that barbarians had made it. And Alexander gets there and he goes, man, I want to be a barbarian then, because this is incredible. Babylon was just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful city. All right, so that is it for today. You guys have gone through a pretty long bit of Alexander. What we're going to do on Thursday is we're going to finish Alexander up, including his death and the split up of his kingdom into the hands of his generals. So his generals are going to split it up, and they're going to take pieces of it. But this is a great opportunity, guys. If you have any questions, now's the time to ask them. We're going to end our story today with Alexander taking possession of Babylon. Next week, on Thursday, we're going to see that he is going to be moving into India. He'll do his quick excursion in India where he'll catch malaria and he will die back in the city of Babylon. He'll be buried actually in Alexandria, or his body will be moved to Alexandria where he will be buried. So that is what we're going to cover on Thursday. And really, guys, Alexander is really cool, but we're also going to learn about some of his flaws. So I see some of you saying he's very clever. Absolutely, he's brilliant. He was brave, absolutely. But he also had some flaws. He's not very trusting. He's quick to anger. He drinks way too much, and we're going to see how that affects the people that have supported him most, the people that have been around him since day one, the people that cared about him since day one, how it affects them, the ones that were always there for him. And so we will move from there. All right, guys, any questions? Now is the time to ask. Or any suggestions for my lecture series that comes up on Thursday. All right, be on the lookout for the formative quiz at 10. All right, so you'll have a Go formative assignment. You're only going to have one this week, and it will be at 10 o'clock today. It will be open all week, but it will be out officially at 10 o'clock. Any questions? How many questions are on the quiz? It could be 70, could be 1, who knows? You'll see. You will find out. Thank you, Kylie. Hope you enjoyed it. All right, bye, Dylan. Goodbye, Talon. Goodbye, Janelle. Goodbye, Valeria. Goodbye. Goodbye, Jasmine. Goodbye, Kylie. Please not 70. Alright, I'll see what I can do. Goodbye. I already answered that question. Between 70 and 1, Sam. There's going to be between 70 and 1. Alright, you too, Gus. Bye, Jasmine. Goodbye, Veryl. Guys, remember, I got a little bit of a delay, so it seems if I didn't answer your question or didn't say goodbye, it's because there's a delay. Goodbye, Soraya. Goodbye, Sam. Veryl, have a good one.